direct from the Pacific Northwest.
Representando a todos los Alvis en los Estados Unidos con Dro Breeze.
You are listening to
You already know
the DroInTheKnow podcast with your host,
the one and only
Dro Breeze.
Happy new week and happy new month. Welcome to a new episode of the DroInTheKnow podcast. As always for the week, I'm your host, Dro Breeze. Once again, giving a big shout out to all the supporters who have been tuning in on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other digital platforms, and now also available and streaming on YouTube. So make sure to search me up under DroInTheKnow podcast. And remember, it really means a lot. And if you really like what you hear, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It truly would be appreciated. On this week's episode, I'm just going to say it straight off the bat here. It's great to have you all tuning into the podcast. Wishing everybody good vibes, good energy. Spring is definitely on the horizon, and just knowing that makes everything, and I mean everything, better. Yes, it does. Something positive to look forward to is always great, despite this pandemic bullshit still ongoing all throughout the world, as you know. And it's really a pleasure to take you, the audience, on an experience, especially when I interview personalities and explore different industries. Whether it's from an entertainment perspective, educational, or analytic perspective, it's always great to learn something new and hear these great, amazing stories from these personalities. So saying that, I wanted to explore an industry that I'm so very passionate about, which is forever changing in the world of radio broadcasting, especially from one of my favorite local hip hop stations, Kube 93 Seattle. And speaking of Kube 93, I want to introduce my next guest, who is a well-known Seattle personality on that station, Lizette Love from the morning show, who's also worked out in Nashville's hip hop station, Hot 101.1. Shout out to my brother Ben and everyone else listening out in the 615. It's always love, you know that. So here we go. My next guest is one of Seattle's most known radio personalities at Kube 93.3 FM. It's with great pleasure to welcome the lovely Lizette Love.
Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time and joining me on this podcast. You know, it's so great to have you on because I've been a long time listener of Kube 93 going back to I don't even remember. And I'll admit, I kind of zoned out when they brought all those changes a couple years back to the station. But when they brought you in and you took over that morning show, those vibes you brought, I'm telling you, you helped us go through the rainstorms and you know, dealing with the traffic in Seattle. You already know how that is. But let's get straight to it. So one of my first questions for you that I have is, are you originally from Southern California, if I'm correct?
I'm originally from Northern California, actually.
My bad. So you're like from the Bay then?
I'm not the Bay. Sometimes I say the Bay, people don't really know the area because they hear Bay. Okay, I know where that's at.
So true.
So yeah, I'm originally from Salinas.
Okay, Salinas.
Some people have heard of it, some haven't.
Yeah.
But it's about 2 hours south of San Francisco.
Okay, I get what you're saying. So it's like San Jose area. So sorry to interrupt you there, but what I've noticed that all Northern California kind of looks alike. You know, they got the valley, the farms, the Latinos, and the major city around. So saying that, what?
I'm right there on the coast.
Oh, okay. So what was it like growing up in Salinas?
It's definitely different. It's a lot of agriculture.
Yeah,
so
I can see
a
that.
lot of field workers. We're very Latino populated.
We just seem to be all over the place, aren't we? Like we're all over the country.
Right. So lots of field workers. People go there because it's easy work, just working in the fields. Lots of gangs and things like that. Your typical California culture.
Yeah, you'll be quite surprised, but there's also areas like that from what you're saying out here in Washington in the valleys that they have that same vibe. I don't know if you're familiar with Southern California, like cities like Victorville. Also sounds a lot like Salinas. I don't know if you've been there before.
I have actually.
You have? Okay. So, it just seems to be throughout the whole entire West Coast where there's that valley, there's that same vibe of lifestyle. You know, it has the farmlands, it has also the attraction, unfortunately, of gang life in our Latino youth. I just wish it wasn't like that, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, it's funny because it's like the same culture, but at the same time, like Northern California and Southern California are like two different worlds.
Yeah,
You know what I
I've
mean?
seen
It
that.
might as well be two different states.
It's funny because, whenever I actually travel to California, just because being based out here in Seattle, right? The way we dress in Seattle it's not because we want to dress that way, but with the rain and everything, and
Mhm.
you go down to LA, people always think that you're from Northern California, especially when
'Cause
you're Latino.
it's cold up there.
I know, and it's like, oh, you from the Bay? It's like, no, I'm from Washington. I just came down here, right?
Yeah.
And they're always tripping out because of the clothing, and then I always put two and two together that yeah, that's right, Northern California is
Mhm.
like a little different, right?
You can tell when somebody's not from, like, where you're from or where you're at, just, like, how they dress and mannerisms and the way they talk and things like that, so,
And the music they listen to, that's
yes.
another thing.
It's funny because, like, Mexicans everywhere, like so I don't know if you know who Eric Rosado is. He does afternoons on Cube.
To be honest with you, I'm always working during the afternoon, so I
Yeah.
actually don't have the chance to listen to Cube 93 at that
Yeah.
time.
He, um, he used to work in Florida,
Yeah,
and there's one girl, that works over there, and I know her too.
yeah,
He was showing her how, like, Latinos were like in California. So she saw like the flannels with the one button and like the Lokes and the Debos and the lowriders, and she was like,
yeah.
"That's real." She had no idea that that was a real
Really?
cultural thing.
That's
She thought it
crazy
was just
shit.
like movie characters.
Yeah, that's real.
She's like, "I didn't know that people really looked like that." We're like, "Yes, bitch."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
it's just
real.
yeah, it's real, and I mean, especially when you grow up. I mean, I'm not really from the old school, but I am from the old school at the same time. If you get what I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
I grew up in high school, early 2000s, mid 2000s, so
Same,
it's still stuck around, right? And then just
but you
seeing the
know
new
it.
generation, exactly. But it just kind of stays there, especially in the culture. You know what I mean? I'm not Mexican. I'm actually Salvadorian
So is
descent.
Eric.
So is Eric? That's
Yeah,
crazy. I did not know that.
yeah.
But it's always, people always mixing it up saying, "Hey, are you hey?" But some people actually know that you're not Mexican, and I don't know if you can tell that sometimes people just say that. They're like,
No, you
"Hey."
look like hella locote. You actually look like one of my cousins.
Really? As
Uh-huh.
everybody said, the bald head, right? But hey, it's
Yeah.
because I'm pelon, right?
Already
It's not a fashion statement. It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So growing up in Salinas, how did you end up in broadcasting? Like, how did that process start in your career? Like, how did you get
Um,
it?
it's really funny. So actually started when I was 16, which,
Yeah,
you actually cannot work until you're 18 for the
yeah.
radio. But what happened was, so I have a sister. She's 2 years older than me. She also does radio, and she's in San Francisco.
Oh wow.
She started interning for the radio station first.
Yeah.
And then, my little badass like ended up getting homeschooled because I was getting kicked out of every school. Like
Oh damn.
it was bad.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting homeschooled because my mom like refused to put me in alternative school. She was like, "No, we're just gonna homeschool you." I was like, "Whatever." I didn't care. And because I was home all the time, I used to just tag along with my sister when they would go out. She was just interning, so the promotions team. You work the streets, you go to events, you talk to people.
Yeah.
So I used to just tag along just to not be home alone and bored.
Yeah.
And I just was going to every event. I was working every remote. I would even show up to like the staff meetings and they're like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm her sister." And they're like, "Okay, cool, whatever." So they just would like let me sit in. And it got to a point where I was just like signing up for shifts and like doing office work and kind of like snuck my way in, but like unintentionally, it just happened, you know.
It
I
just happened
I
like
just was
just
like, "Oh, this is kind of fun. This is cool. I like it." Like
yeah.
so I just kind of like showed up one day and never left. And then once I turned 18, that's when they finally like, I signed paperwork. I became an official intern after being there already for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And then when I was 19 is when I started doing middays at that station there.
Yeah.
So, which was really cool because it kind of like the way it works is kind of like if something opens up, they always will look internally to see who they can use to fill that spot. And if there's nobody internally, then okay, we'll look outside of the market and see what options we have. But if there's somebody internally who's been there and knows the work, knows the area and things like that, then it's
Yeah.
like a no-brainer. We're going to use this person. So I was that internal person that took over middays, and I was like the youngest, 19 years old. Like that doesn't happen. I was the youngest
Yeah,
person
it doesn't.
at that station to do middays. And still to this day, I don't know anyone who's ever done middays at 19.
No, that's a big accomplishment,
So
especially, just it just happened, right? It's one of
mhm,
those things where you're not, targeting for it to happen. It just magically happened. Well,
Yeah.
not magically. I guess it's fate, right? It just
I
took you
mean,
there.
I still, you know, like put in my work and things like that, but it just was like I replaced my sister when she went to San Francisco, and they're like, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yes." Duh. But
So,
it was a long journey.
this actually may sound like a trip, right? So, on Instagram a couple months ago, I'm actually just scrolling around, and I all of a sudden noticed, how they give you those recommendations for people you may know,
Mhm.
and then I see you pull up there, and then I see that it says Cube 93, but then I'm just trying to put two and two together because I see you with Cube 93 on your profile, and then I see a lot of family, and I mean a lot of my family. I'm talking about like 10 people, mutual friends with you, and then they're from Nashville, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And it was just tripping me out because I'm like, how I frequently go to Nashville. I mean, pre-pandemic thing,
Right.
and it just tripped me out when I actually saw, and I was actually wondering, I was asking people, hey, do I know this? Have I met, because we're really like tight knit, like everybody just knows everybody, right?
Mhm.
And then it came to me that I come to find out later that you actually were out in the 615 working out in Nashville at one point at 101 The Beat, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like? Because that's a huge
Um,
transition going from Selena's all the way to Nashville. Like that's a
yes.
big change, especially career wise.
That actually is it's kind of was the same situation when I went there. So, when I moved out there, I did not have a job there. What
Hmm.
happened was right when I got hired, to do middays when I was 19, couple months after that, I got pregnant.
Oh,
So, really
was it?
young,
Was this in California or was that in
in California.
Okay,
So, around the time I got hired was around the time, that I found out I was pregnant.
yeah,
And my son's dad was like, my mom lives in Tennessee. She didn't live in Nashville. She lives in Clarksville, which is about 45 minutes out.
yeah,
But she's like, she lives out there. It's very cheap out there.
yeah, it
She has
is.
a house. She has a room for us. We could go like live with her and kind of just like start our lives out there. It's very, very cheap.
Yeah,
And I was like, no, like I just got hired. This is a full-time position. They're starting me part-time. And then, I'm soon enough, I'm going to be full-time. And then like, we'll be fine.
yeah,
Well, 2 years go by and I was still working part-time. And I really thought that it was going to work out and it ended up like not working out. And then I had to make a decision. Like my son is about to be 2. Do I
yeah,
stay here and struggle and like not give up on the dream? Or do I call it quits? Like I need to do what's best for, me and my son. So I
hmm,
ended up deciding like, okay, we can move to Tennessee. So I actually went and tried to quit, like put in my 2 weeks. And they were like, is there a radio station out there like close to you? And I was like, yeah, there's one in Nashville. They're like, would you be willing to keep your job and do your show from Nashville? It's like, yes, this is my chance to like move out there, keep my job. So that's what I did. And I was driving up to Nashville twice a week and doing my show and in California. So even less money than I was making, but it was a way for me to keep what I wanted to do. Um, so I did that for a little while, but me having my foot in the door in that building in
yeah,
iHeart Nashville, I already knew like what to do, right?
yeah,
So the minute I got there, I was meeting everybody I could. Okay, who's in charge? You're the boss. Okay, I need to go meet you. Let me go shake your hand. Let me let you know that I'm here. Let me show you what I can do. And they ended up trying me out on 1011 on the beat in Nashville. They're like, middays is open, which I knew. So I finessed my way in there. And
yeah,
they're like, we'll try you out this weekend and we'll see how you sound and how you do. And I was like, okay, cool. Thank you so much. So they put me on. I did my first weekend shift, and then I started that first week doing middays in Nashville, and they literally just like never took me off. They're like, we're gonna try you out and test you and see how you do. And I was like, bet. And I knew once I got on, they weren't gonna take me off because I know how this works.
yeah.
So they put me on, and they never took me off. I became the first music director for them in Nashville, and I was there for 5 years.
That's a big accomplishment getting to that point. And 5 years at
Mhm.
a radio station, that's a very long time. Like I was telling you that that's a big transition change, but I guess it was worth it at the very end, especially taking on a brand new market out in the South. Um, but I have a question for you here. In your
Yeah.
opinion, what is the difference between the market out in Nashville to say compared to Seattle? Is it pretty much the same formula throughout the country, or do listeners vibe differently to new music, like when you're playing new songs?
No, it's definitely different. So the format I was on in Nashville was urban. The format here
Yeah.
in Seattle is rhythmic, which are two different formats. So you're going to hear
Yeah.
two different kinds of music. In Nashville, they were very forward.
Mm-hmm.
So people were like listeners were very like familiar with new music.
Yeah, and I remember that being out there.
In Seattle, people are very slow.
It's so true, though.
Where if you play new music, if you play too much of unfamiliar music,
You scare them
they
away.
don't. If it's unfamiliar, they're not gonna want to listen to it. They don't like it. And that's part of why, everyone's like, you play the same music over and over again. And it's like, yeah, because it takes like 6 months for someone to actually hear a song and be like, oh, I know that song. I like that song.
Yeah, that's so true.
So it was definitely more forward and things moved faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then out here, it's like the total opposite.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm a transplant myself. I mean, I pretty much grew up actually in Vancouver, Canada. But when I actually moved down here, it's
weird. You're Canadian?
I'm both. I'm dual. But it's crazy because it's like at least Seattle actually has a hip hop station, but I don't know, something about the vibe out here is a little different despite being so close. You know what I mean?
It's a hip hop station, but it's what we call like Seattle hip hop.
That's a good way to put it.
Like sometimes I listen to my station in Nashville.
Yeah.
Just because sometimes, I just kind of listen to see what they're doing. And if I hear anything wrong, like I'm always texting the PD, like, hey, this just aired. Hey, this wasn't seg tight enough. He's like, oh, fuck you. Like, stop listening. But I'm always like, I nitpick at everything.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like, it's completely different. I listen now that I haven't been there for so long. I'm like, oh my God, that station is so ratchet. I miss it so much. But it's like when you're there, you don't notice like just how like gritty the music is.
Yeah, it's a lot of trap and country shit out there.
And I've been listening to like Post Malone and Triple X and like Juice WRLD over and over again. Yeah. And it's like that's hip hop here.
I love that Southern comfort feel when you go out to Nashville because it's like, it's funny how you say that everything's slower here and everything's faster there. But also the city vibes is the complete opposite. It's like it's very slow out there. Even when people driving out there, it's super slow with, you see that car with the super like subs and just people driving super slow and taking those back streets. I can't stand back streets. I hate back streets. I don't know why everybody loves doing that out there. But like
the pops.
Exactly. And then in Seattle's the opposite. You're stuck in a freeway and just waiting in traffic all day, right? But when exactly did you come to Seattle? I mean, what brought you to Seattle in the first place?
Well, unlike when I went to Nashville, so when I came to Seattle, it actually was for this job. So I moved here for this job. It was funny that you mentioned you kind of like you used to listen to Kube and then you stopped and then all of a sudden you listen again. Well, Kube actually went away for a really long time.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask you about that in a sec, but
and it flipped to some other station. I don't really know much about like what happened because I was like before I got here and I'm like, whatever, I don't care. It's back and I'm here. So that's all we care about. Let's move forward. Yeah. But it actually went away for a long time. And then when the relaunch happened is I feel like it relaunched in May. I want to say May 2018.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think it relaunched in May 2018. And then they were putting together a new morning show. They were building a new morning show. And I just was one of the candidates, one of the people that they were looking at. And so when they hit me up, they were like, hey, would you be interested in doing like, AM Drive morning show co-host? I was like, yeah, where? No, we can't tell you that yet. Just, are you interested? Do you want it or not? And
so you're kind of like,
I agreed to this job without knowing like where it was or like what station, what format, who else was going to be working. Like they couldn't tell me anything because everything was super top secret. but
Yeah.
the person I was talking to, I trusted, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was just like, okay, all I knew was that it was like a top market morning show, and that's like the best slot you can have in radio
Yeah.
is mornings. So I was like, okay, well, it's now or never. Like, it just happened all at perfect timing because 2018 was a year that I really, really used to network and travel and meet a lot of people,
Yeah.
which I did. I was on like 6 different radio stations at the time.
Wow,
And
that's a lot of radio stations to be on one time. All
it
6 at one time?
well, they weren't all the same time slot, but like in that
I
same time period, like yeah, like some was like midday shifts, some was like weekend shifts, some station I would fill in on. So yeah, there were times I was doing 4 stations all at the same time in the studio, and I'm like switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
yeah.
But it was like it's all part of the hustle. Like that's how you expand. It's a lot of work, and it's like really time consuming, especially like I'm a single mom, and I would have to like
Yeah.
get my son to school, go to work, knock this out. I gotta do this, that, and the third, and then I gotta go pick up my son from school. Sometimes I'd have to bring him back to the station, and we would be there till 7 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I'm not done, but I gotta take the kid home and feed him dinner. Like,
Yeah,
you
you
know,
gotta do what you gotta do, right? I mean,
right?
and that's inspirational to know that, you're making things happen, especially, the fact that, you're building wherever you worked, you left behind,
Yeah.
a recognition of where people know. Like I'm saying, some people know you in Nashville now, and I came across you in Seattle, and then there's a Nashville Seattle connection, and then you're from California, right?
Yeah.
It what was your first impression when you came to Seattle? When they announced that was Seattle, how did you feel about it?
When I first came here, like physically, I thought it was really cool because when my first time here, I was actually interviewing. So I saw, the building, the station. It was the weekend of Bumbershoot. So
Hmm.
I got to go to that. I got tickets to like a Seahawks game. So they're like, obviously, they're gonna butter you up and show you all like the best of the city.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh shoot, like, y'all got festivals here? Like that's dope. Like I went to Bumbershoot. I saw J. Cole. He's one of my favorite artists. I was like really excited. Um, so it was a lot of fun. What I did notice was like one thing that stuck out. It was just obviously a huge culture shock coming from Nashville. And
Hmm.
then I come here and I'm like, everyone's white.
Yeah.
Like, is this is it? And they're like, this is it. These are your listeners. I was like, wow, it's so different. Like,
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, it's
so
crazy
different.
too. It's like, you know what I like to refer to it. Like, you know how for African Americans there's Atlanta, and then for Latinos there's LA and Miami. Well,
Mhm.
Seattle's the Caucasian market. You know what
It
I mean?
really is.
Yeah.
It
It's
really
like
is.
the bread and butter. I mean, it's a nice city, and I mean,
It's
how
kind of
did you?
like a second Bay Area. It's very techy.
Yeah, it is
That's what I call
definitely.
it. I'm like, it's very techy, and it's like a mini like Santa Clara Bay Area. There's like all the Microsoft, Amazon, like hella Teslas. Everyone drives a Tesla. I don't know why.
Or a Prius, if you notice that too.
Yeah.
Either the Prius or the Tesla. What impression did you get when they told you, when they finally announced it, that hey, it's going to be Seattle? How are you feeling? I mean, they kept the top secret for quite some time, right?
Yeah, they did. From me too, which I was really surprised because I'm like, you tell me everything. And he was like, I know I can't. But I was really excited because ever since I had gone to Tennessee and gone to Nashville, all I ever wanted to do was not necessarily go back home, but I wanted to be closer. I wanted to come back on the West Coast. So it was
Yeah,
like I was really excited because at the time I had just interviewed in LA
yeah.
and didn't get that position. So I was like
I'm so
really,
sorry.
really bummed. I was like, this is like
Yeah,
market, it's LA, like fun radio station. And then when this happened, I'm like, well, I mean, it's not LA, it's not market number 2, but it's what I want. It's what I wanted.
and you're still in the West, and you're
It's
close
on
to
the West
home.
Coast. It's a
Yeah,
couple hour flight. If I want to go visit family, if I need to go home for anything, it's like right there. So
yeah.
I was really excited.
No, yeah. I mean, it's a great opportunity, and it's a growing market still, in my opinion. I mean, since I moved down here about 6 years ago,
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's
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 growing.
just a market that's just growing and growing, and you're starting to see a lot of more transplants too, especially from California coming up here.
Hmm.
So, I know they really don't explain this to you, but is there a reason why they keep switching the formats in radio all the time? Because, like you were saying at one point when they changed to Cube 93, I
Um,
don't like how they do that, no announcement, no warnings. All of a
yeah,
sudden, billboards are
it just
swapped.
happens sometimes. It's all about ratings, and obviously everything is politics and what is going to generate the most revenue. And sometimes if they just find like, hey, this pop station isn't working, let's flip it to like alternative or something, because that's what these people listen to and that's what's going to get them to listen to us. Like sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen very often. Like it's
Yeah.
very rare that I've worked, none of my stations have ever flipped that I've worked on, but I think it's only been like twice that it's happened in a building that I've worked in, that they'll flip a station. And a lot of times it's just kind of like a test.
Yeah.
It's not like this is like the golden recipe and this is what's going to save us. A lot of times it's like, well, what do we have to lose? Let's just try it and see what happens. You
Yeah, I
know?
mean, it always it throws things off though. I mean, with fans at Cube 93, they used to have the summer jams. I don't know if they still do that because like I told you, I started listening again, like especially during the
Mhm.
pandemic. But I mean, they used to have all these festivals. It was a great station, and then just overnight, after so many years, you just see billboards, and then it's like trance music or something like that, and you're like, what's
I
going
honestly
on?
don't even know what it flips to. I have no idea.
It was something like that. So I went from strictly hip hop to festivals sponsored by Cube 93, and then
Mhm.
it went into, if I'm correct, some trance music, and then people saw the different color schemes and like what's going on to the station. You're like, you know what I mean? And then they say we're back. I'm like, why did you spend all that money changing the billboards all throughout the city? And then you
Yeah,
just see
I have no
eh,
idea. I
exactly.
don't know too much of the backstory because obviously, like, I wasn't here when
Yeah,
all that happened. So I don't really know
but
too much of the backstory.
you came and you helped bring it back to what it used to be, right?
That
That's the
was the
most
goal.
important thing. So you're a Latina and a minority and a woman. Our people face discrimination on a daily basis, even if it's passive. You know, Having to carry those three things, especially with everything going on and still going on, especially after President 45. What struggles have you faced in the industry to this day? I mean, do you want to share anything? Like, do you see things as like
Um,
as a Latina that do they have like a stereotype of us in the industry or anything like that?
um, I wouldn't, not necessarily. I honestly think that right now, being Latina in the industry or being African American in the industry is a huge, what's the word? Not privilege. It's a really big advantage right now,
Is it?
um, because there's not a lot of us, and
Yeah,
we are in high demand.
really?
You
That's
know,
crazy.
ever since I started, I've always been told like there's not a lot of like Latinas in radio.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
need to stick with it because I wanted to quit so many times.
Really? Why?
So many. I used to be in my boss's office crying, like I think I'm gonna quit. Like I'm not getting anywhere. I've been working so hard and nothing's happening. And he's just like, don't quit. It takes time. I promise you. Like, just keep at it. Keep working hard. You're a woman, which obviously this is like a male driven industry.
Hmm.
You're a woman. You're talented. You're Latina. There's not a lot of you,
Yeah,
and you are in high demand. And I think it's still till this day, especially with with everything that's been happening, people want that person on air that they can listen to, that they can relate to, that goes through the same
yeah,
struggle.
yeah,
And you're
definitely.
only going to hear that from hiring a Latina or hiring an African American person that can share and relate to the audience,
Yeah,
because you're not
no,
going to get that from anybody else who's not going through it. And if you try to, then like it's just fake as hell. Nobody's going to listen.
yeah, I agree with you because, before you came to Cube 93, I remember the old format. There was probably a couple African Americans, and then the rest were just Caucasian personalities. And that's really what the whole, format was for quite some time. And then, now that they came back, I've noticed that they've actually brought a lot of new people and a lot of
Mhm.
a new sound. And it's great because it actually kind of reflects, the diversity in the city, especially out in, Western Washington, right? So I
Mhm.
think it's great what you've been doing. I mean, what like the fact that there's a Latina on Wake Up Call. I like that. I mean, you talk about topics that I can relate to. I mean, I think you were doing something about beers or something like that a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago
Oh
about
yeah, the blind beer. It's funny you say that because
yeah, there you go, Modelo, right? So I
know,
mean, there's so many things you can relate to, right? So that's a great thing. I mean,
yeah,
do you see any changes coming to radio that will forever change the landscape, especially with COVID and sponsorships and working remote? Do you think that this is going
yeah.
to change?
I think for a long time everything has just been going digital, and for a long time everything has slowly been transitioning into digital, and technology is advancing, and it's you can do anything from anywhere these days, you
Yeah.
know, and you can do multiple things at once these days.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy.
it's definitely like it's getting busier, and I remember when like iHeartRadio, not iHeartRadio, but when the app launched. So we used to
Yeah.
be Clear Channel, and then they launched this iHeart app, and everyone was like, "Who's going to listen to music on an app? Like we have radio." And it's like, well,
Yeah.
now everyone that's all about Spotify, iTunes, like your Apple Music, like it's really hard to be in radio these days. So you just have to keep being creative and thinking of different ways to like capture your audience, and things are constantly changing.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. I've noticed it, and maybe you can answer this question for me. Are all radio stations throughout the country actually pretty much owned by iHeartRadio at this point? Because it seems
No.
that I always see iHeartRadio I listen to Power 106 sometimes, and from California. I
Mhm.
listen to Cube 93, and it seems that everything is just under iHeart Media or iHeartRadio. I'm like,
I think
that's
Power
crazy.
actually is an iHeart.
Is it?
I, I think
If
Power
it's not Power, it's the
is
Beat or the Power. I can't remember. I think at one point it was under iHeart.
Power is a different company. There's actually like a lot of different radio
Companies
broadcasting
under the same
companies.
name, huh?
No, they have their own name, their own brand.
Yeah.
I think iHeart has done a very good job with their branding, because like you think that there's only iHeart. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Like
And that's how they make it feel. I mean,
yeah.
everything you want to find is like, hey, you want to listen to this radio from California, you want to listen to radio from Nashville or whatever. It's like
Mhm.
iHeartRadio just
Go to the
is
app.
that exactly,
Yeah.
right?
And that was the point of it.
Yeah.
That you
And they did a
can
good
stream
job.
any radio station from anywhere. You can stream it online, or you can download the app and listen to any station from this iHeart app. But there
Yeah.
are actually, a good handful of different radio broadcasting companies. Power 106 is actually not iHeart. I think what you're thinking of is
The
Real
Beat.
in LA.
Oh, the Real. Yeah. They used to be the Beat, and then they
Real
always change
Real
names. Yeah.
92.3. They're iHeart, but yeah, there's some pretty big, well-known radio stations that are not iHeart, but you probably wouldn't think like, oh, let me Google what company this is. Like you just think iHeart, like it's just in your
Yeah.
face.
No, I can only imagine that. I mean, what do you love about your broadcasting job? I mean, what is the things to love and what's the things to hate
I
about it?
mean, it's just fun. I get to just go in there and like talk. I get to share my experiences, um, help other people, like just talking about like myself and my experiences and things I've gone through. Sometimes it's not easy, and sometimes I do get very transparent on air, and like I've cried before
Oh, wow.
on air, like talking about things, but
Yeah.
it's like I know that someone listening, it's going to help them.
Yeah, and
And
it's a human thing too. I mean, that's what makes you so people can relate to you on that level too, because you talk about things
mhm,
that,
you
you
get to
know,
just like use this platform, a really big platform, and you get to use
yeah,
it to help people, whether it's like just promoting, hey, there's this coat drive for kids that like need coats, or kids that are hungry, they're collecting food, or hey, if you need food, you can go here. Like things like
yeah,
that, help people, or just letting other moms know that like I'm not rich either. I'm struggling too. Being a single mom is hard.
yeah. I
Like
can only imagine.
dealing with the same things, like this homeschooling shit is like
Not easy.
it's so hard. I'm struggling right alongside with you, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I know. We're all in this together. That's the crazy thing.
Exactly.
Some people hear you on air or they see somebody on TV and they think that they're not human. They think that they're just
Right.
living the life right now, right? That
Yeah, and
that's
I'm
crazy,
like, no, I can't pay my bills either, honey. We all lost money.
No doubt. No, I understand. Is there if people want to follow you up, can they find you on social media? Do you have any future projects that you're working on the side from Cube 93?
Not too like I really don't. I wish I did, but I don't have any like individual projects that I work on that I can promote. I really wish I did, but I truly don't have the time or the energy to do something like that. Like, I have no branding manager, I have no assistant, like I do everything. But I
Yeah.
am on social. I'm at Lizette Love on Twitter, at Lizette Love on Instagram with 2 E's, TikTok, Facebook. It's all the same.
Yeah, I love your TikTok videos. They're hilarious. Some of the things you post there is hilarious. Yeah, anytime. So, I really want to thank you again for taking the time and, just joining me on this, podcast.
Of course.
It's always great to see other Latinos make it in the industry, especially because, there's always that representation. You're that, believe it or not, and you may not think this, but you are a pioneer for this area, especially because there was never many Latinos online. I mean, I'm being honest with you about that. Like,
Yeah.
it's just
That's
unheard
another
of.
reason why I do take pride in, and I am very appreciative of being able to be on air because like there's not a lot of us, you're right.
Yeah, there's
So
not.
I definitely take advantage, to show little girls or women or whatever, like here we are.
It makes a big impact because people always have this stereotype of us being like either field workers or like not speaking English, and they get or
Mhm.
you've seen, I know you've seen that before where they're like, oh, you speak English, wow.
No, I
I've seen,
actually
you haven't faced
people
that.
are more surprised that I actually do not speak fluent Spanish.
Oh wow. You see, that's the opposite too, because
Yeah.
I'm bilingual. I mean, I mostly grew up speaking to my parents in Spanish, but I also, went to school here and everything like that. So
Mhm.
people always see the weird thing when it's, when they hear me speak English, they think, oh, you're not Latino really, like, you don't speak like, with an accent.
And
And
that's
then,
what sucks,
they
like,
hear
that's
me.
how they look at us, Well, not you because you are bilingual, but that's how I get looked at, and it's like, yeah, I know I'm, like, hella light and I don't speak Spanish, but, like, that doesn't make me any, like, less Latina than you. Like, it's not my fault that my parents didn't speak to me in Spanish at home and that I
Yeah.
went to school and spoke English, like,
And you know what? But it's in your blood. It's in your blood. It's the culture, what we
but
eat, what we
what my
do.
go-to argument always is Selena didn't speak Spanish either, so
Yeah, that's what? That's an actual true statement. But you know what? Saying all that aside, I really do want to take the opportunity to thank you once again for coming on to this podcast.
thank
I
you.
really wish you the best. Working at Cube 93, you are a pioneer in this industry, especially for us Latinos out here in the Pacific Northwest. Once again, just wishing you the best.
Nice, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Lizette Love from Seattle's Cube 93.3. You can catch her every morning. In the meantime, I want to send my love to everybody listening to this episode. I will be back next week. Once again, check me out on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. You already know all the platforms. Giving a big shout out to everybody. Peace and love.
Broadcasting live and direct from the Pacific Northwest.
Representando a todos los Albis en los Estados Unidos con Dro Breeze.
You are listening to
You already know.
the Dro in the Know podcast with your host,
The one and only
Dro Breeze.